Pompeii's Roman brothel. Why you wouldn't last until morning. Close your eyes for just a moment. You are in Pompeii. And before you stands the Lupanar, the infamous Wolf's Den, a Roman brothel frozen in time. But here's the twist. You're not just a traveler. You've brought your 21st century mind with you. You know about hygiene, about human rights, about trauma and dignity. And with that knowledge, you're about to step into a place where none of it exists. The question isn't just could you survive one night here? The real question is, with everything you know today, what would you do differently if you were trapped in the past? Because history is more than ruins and ash. It's a mirror, showing us not only how far we've come, but how fragile progress really is. 1. Daily survival in the Roman brothel, hygiene, health, and hidden dangers. The first thing that hits you when you step inside isn't what you see. It's what you smell. The air is heavy, sour, damp with sweat and smoke. The rooms are carved from stone, each barely large enough for a wooden bed. There's no window, no breeze, no clean water flowing anywhere. You suddenly realize, this isn't just a brothel. It's a health disaster waiting to happen. Your modern mind immediately notices the invisible killers. The bed linens, never washed. The floors, a breeding ground for lice and fleas. And the water, stagnant, shared, contaminated, would spread diseases faster than fire. Romans didn't believe in germs. They thought sickness came from bad air. But you know better. You recall Marcus Terentius Varro, a Roman scholar who once suggested that tiny invisible creatures caused disease. His ideas were ignored for centuries. Standing here, you know he was right. And that simple habits, like boiling water or washing hands, could have saved countless lives. And it isn't just infections. Imagine the women here, forced to work, night after night, with no understanding of reproductive health. Complications from childbirth, untreated infections, and malnutrition were common. A scraped knee today might mean a tetanus shot. Here, it could mean death. The harsh truth is this. Survival in the Lupanar wasn't about strength or beauty. It was about sheer luck. Whether your body could withstand the invisible dangers surrounding you. Small lesson. What feels ordinary to us, clean water, soap, fresh air, would have been revolutionary here. Sometimes, progress is measured not in great inventions, but in the small, everyday practices that keep us alive. And yet, hygiene was only part of the struggle. Behind every sick body was an even harsher reality, an economy built on exploitation, where survival meant surrendering freedom for coins. That's where our journey takes us next. 2. The business of exploitation. Power, money, and social control. Step deeper into the Lupanar, and you begin to notice something unsettling. This isn't just about survival. It's about an entire system. Every coin exchanged, every painted fresco on the walls, every name carved into the stone. It all points to one truth. This was a business. And like many businesses of the Roman world, it was built on exploitation. For the Romans, brothels served a purpose. They claimed it kept order, protected respectable women, and maintained social control. But what they really created was an economy where people, mostly women, often children, were turned into commodities. What you see as human trafficking, they saw as normal commerce. And yet, if you look closer, you also see untapped potential. These workers weren't just bodies. They were multilingual, skilled in reading people, experienced in negotiation and hospitality. In another world, they could have been translators, merchants, or advisors. Imagine if they had been allowed to form something like a collegia, Rome's version of a guild. Instead of handing over everything to a Lano, the pimp, they could have run cooperatives, shared profits, and gained independence. History gives us glimpses of what might have been. Roman women like Livia and Agrippina influenced politics at the highest levels. And centuries earlier, Aspasia of Miletus was celebrated as a philosopher and advisor in Athens. The truth is, the intelligence and capability were always there. It was the system that denied them. Small lesson: a society thrives not when it controls its people, but when it empowers them. By locking people into exploitation, Rome wasted human potential that could have made their civilization even greater. But even if you managed to change the economics, something far deeper was at play. Behind every transaction was a person carrying wounds you couldn't see, the weight of trauma, loneliness, and a world that refused to acknowledge their dignity. And that brings us to the final, most human struggle of all. 3. Beyond the ashes. Trauma, human dignity, and the eruption that froze it all. As you linger inside those narrow stone rooms, you begin to notice something deeper than disease or money. The silence, the blank stares, the way people move without emotion, as if they've left their minds somewhere far away. Today, we would call it trauma, dissociation, the quiet survival instinct of a person who has endured too much. But the Romans had no word for it. They saw it as obedience, as discipline. You, with your 21st century mind, know better. You see human beings trapped in cycles of psychological pain. Look closer at the graffiti on the walls. At first it seems crude, lists of names, explicit drawings, fragments of jokes. But behind the humor is a cry for connection. Livia is the best. One man scratched into the stone. It isn't just a review. It's loneliness etched into history. People came here not only for pleasure, but for a brief illusion of intimacy in a society that rarely offered it. And then comes the rumble. Mount Vesuvius begins to stir. The ground trembles beneath your feet. The lamps flicker, and outside, a column of ash begins to rise into the sky. Within hours, this entire world will be buried. The workers you just met, the clients, the owners, they'll vanish, their final moments preserved in volcanic stone. It's haunting, isn't it? Because the tragedy wasn't just the eruption. It was that an empire capable of aqueducts, amphitheaters, and philosophy still couldn't recognize the dignity of the most vulnerable people within it. Small lesson. Human progress isn't only measured in monuments or inventions. It's measured in compassion. The ruins of Pompeii remind us that brilliance without humanity crumbles just as easily as stone under ash. And so, as the dust settles in your imagination, the question lingers. If you were truly there, with your modern knowledge and empathy, what would you have done? That is where our journey finds its answer, in the lesson that still echoes across 2,000 years. When the ash finally fell, Pompeii was sealed in silence. Yet through that silence, a message survived. The frescoes, the graffiti, the frozen expressions, they remind us that history isn't just about emperors, battles, or monuments. It's about ordinary people. People who laughed, suffered, dreamed, and endured. People whose humanity was often denied, but never erased. And here's the truth. You wouldn't survive a night in the Roman brothel, not because of the danger of disease or even the eruption, but because your modern heart would break. You would feel the weight of exploitation, the injustice of wasted potential, the deep ache of human dignity ignored. And that pain, that inability to accept what was once considered normal, is proof that humanity has grown. The ultimate lesson? Progress isn't only about technology or wealth. It's about empathy, about refusing to accept systems that strip people of their worth. Every time we fight for fairness, for safety, for dignity, we're writing a different ending to stories like those of the Lupanar. So now, I want to ask you, if you carried your modern knowledge back into the past, what would you change? And maybe the better question is, what can you change in the present, right here, right now? Because history isn't just something we study, it's something we carry forward. And the choices we make today will decide what kind of ruins we leave behind for future generations to study. If this journey through Pompeii made you think differently about the past and about our own world, hit that subscribe button, share this video, and tell me in the comments, what forgotten corner of history should we travel to next? The past is full of warnings. The future is full of possibilities. And together, We get to choose which one we follow. You won't survive as a slave in ancient Rome without knowing these three economic secrets. Imagine this. You're standing in the heart of the Roman Forum more than 2,000 years ago. The morning sun glints off marble columns, but your eyes lock onto a different scene. A child led onto the auction block, a wooden tag around her neck that reads, "Obedient, good for household work." The crowd shouts prices, their voices echoing across the square. As a modern observer, your heart aches. But as a time traveler from the 21st century, you see something else. Not just cruelty, but an entire economic system. Vast, powerful, and ultimately broken. In this journey, we're going to discover why slavery wasn't just immoral. It was Rome's greatest economic trap. How forced labor killed innovation and kept Rome from reaching its true potential. And most importantly, why freedom is the most valuable form of capital Rome never invested in. But before we dive in, let me ask you this. If you could step back into ancient Rome, what would you change first? Hold on to that thought, because what you're about to see will change the way you look at Rome forever. 1. The true cost of slavery. Rome's hidden economic trap. You're still in the slave market. The air smells of sweat, dust, and fear. A Roman landowner raises his hand, purchasing a young farm worker for 500 sestertii, the equivalent of nearly 2 years' wages for a soldier guarding the empire's borders. At first glance, it looks like a bargain. One-time payment, lifetime labor. But with modern eyes, you quickly see the illusion. Hidden costs everywhere. Every slave must be fed, housed, guarded. If they get sick, that's on you. If they run away, you lose your investment. And here's the kicker. Rebellion wasn't rare. Historian Appian writes that Spartacus's rebellion grew so fast, it nearly toppled Rome itself. Crushing it cost Rome the equivalent of billions in today's dollars. That's not profit. That's a bleeding wound in the economy. Productivity, miscalculation. And what about productivity? Studies today show that motivated workers can be 13% more productive than unmotivated ones. A slave forced into the fields does the bare minimum to survive. A free farmer, working for wages, and the dream of land ownership, will pour heart and soul into the soil. Imagine 25% more wheat harvested from the same land, simply because the worker cares about the outcome. If you were a Roman landowner, would you rather have 100 workers you must chain and guard, or 50 who work twice as hard because they want to feed their families? The economic trap. The Romans thought they were saving money, but in reality, they were buying liabilities. It's like a modern company relying entirely on unpaid interns. On paper, it looks cheap, but turnover, low quality, and lawsuits destroy you long term. Lesson: the cheapest option can be the most expensive. Rome's obsession with slavery was like filling a warehouse with defective machines, costly to maintain, dangerous to operate, and always on the edge of exploding. And money was only the first layer. The deeper cost, the future Rome never built. 2. Innovation. Denied how slavery stalled Rome's potential. You leave the market and step into a blacksmith's workshop. Sparks fly, hammers ring, 10 men hammering one iron bar. Your modern brain screams, one simple water wheel could replace all of this. Here's the twist. Romans already knew about watermills. Vitruvius, a Roman engineer, wrote about them in the 1st century BCE. They had prototypes for steam engines, gears, cranes, all the seeds of industrialization. Yet, they barely used them. Why? Slaves were cheaper than machines. When labor is free, innovation looks unnecessary. Why invest in technology when you can buy another pair of hands for 500 sestertii? Example from history. Columella, a Roman agricultural writer, once admitted that relying too heavily on slaves led to waste and mismanagement. He noticed that free tenant farmers, colony, produced better yields, because they had personal stakes in success. Yet Rome stuck with the slave model anyway. The innovation trap. This is what economists today call an innovation trap. Abundance of cheap labor killed incentive to invent. Think about it. The Industrial Revolution in Europe came only when wages rose, forcing people to innovate. Rome had the brains, the tools, the resources, but slavery made innovation unnecessary. What would the world look like if Rome had embraced its water mills and steam prototypes? Could we have had smartphones in the 5th century instead of the 21st? Comparison to Athens, with fewer slaves and more reliance on free citizens, fostered philosophy, mathematics, and science. Rome, richer and stronger, chose short-term profit over long-term progress. Lesson: success can become your worst enemy. Rome's wealth blinded it, making it comfortable with the status quo. They could have sparked the Industrial Revolution 1,000 years early, but chose shackles instead. And this wasn't just about tools and machines. The greatest inventions Rome missed out on were inside the minds they never set free. 3. Freedom as capital. The missed investment of Rome. You step into Cicero's villa, quiet and filled with scrolls. Here lives Cicero, and with him, a man history nearly forgot. Tiro, his secretary, his assistant, and his slave. For years, Tiro copied Cicero's speeches word for word. Then Cicero made a radical choice. He freed him. The ripple of freedom. That single act unlocked genius. Tiro invented shorthand writing, capturing speeches at lightning speed. Because of him, thousands of documents survived, shaping Roman law and literature for centuries. Without Tiro, we might have lost much of Cicero's legacy, and with it, our understanding of Roman thought. The venture capital analogy. Cicero didn't just free a man. He made a now investment. Like a modern angel investor, he traded short-term control for long-term exponential return. One man's freedom yielded innovations that outlived the empire itself. Imagine the possibilities. Now imagine if Rome had a freedom fund. Merchants pooling money to free mathematicians, engineers, artists. How many inventions were lost because minds like Tiro's were chained? How many revolutions in science and trade were delayed by centuries? If you owned a slave who spoke 5 languages and knew trade routes across Africa, would you keep him scrubbing floors or let him build you a trading empire? Lesson: the highest return on investment isn't ownership, it's trust. Free people innovate. Free people create. Free people build the future. Rome never understood this, and it cost them dearly. But we don't have to repeat their mistake. Looking back, 3 truths stand out. 1. The hidden trap. Slavery looked cheap, but it was ruinously expensive. 2. Innovation denied. Cheap labor killed long-term creativity. 3. Freedom as capital. Rome ignored the greatest investment of all, human potential. These weren't just moral failures. They were strategic blunders that hollowed Rome from within. And here's the modern echo. We, too, have our blind spots. Entire communities cut off from education. Talents wasted because of inequality. People trapped in modern forms of servitude. If Rome could stumble because it failed to unleash the power of its people, so could we. The greatest asset in any age isn't land, gold, or armies. It's the creativity and freedom of human beings. So let me leave you with one question. Who are the Tiros of our world today? And what future might we unlock if we set them free? If you found this journey meaningful, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next time travel adventure. And share your thoughts in the comments. If you could step back into ancient Rome, what's the first thing you would change? Because history isn't just about the past. It's about the choices we make today and the future we choose to build together.